of harm. So if you look at the Code of Good Practice for Sexual Harassment, it doesn't have that stringent criteria because that's an internet. That's the employer in those situations need to put in safe mechanisms. You need to comply. You need to. So harassment, in terms of a lot of the body of case law that's developed outside of the labor, is it needs to be repetitive because that's harassment. But now the body of case law that is starting to develop from the Code of Good Practice, the one the judges overruled the lower presiding officer where they said, well, it wasn't repetitive conduct, but they said, no, the Code of Good Practice of 2005 that was promulgated by the Minister on Sexual Harassment specifically has a particular section that says it didn't need to be repetitive. But now what I want to leave you with, or I want you to think, because that's what it's all about. The test. So here's all the laws. Right? Now when the judge sits and when we argue, we have to pass a test. What is the test? How do you know if this is harassment? Is it an objective test? Is it a subjective? The body case that has been developed, and it's objective. So what is an objective? It means that the psychology is really taken cognizance. Now what I want to throw at you is that in delict, law delict, you're a thin skull. You take your victim as you find. I read a case now in preparation to speak to you in light of Vuk'uzenzele so that I honor this opportunity that you give me. It is SABWiL versus lamakhosikazi. And you know in that judgment, it tells they're grappling with the Constitution. They're saying, yes, the objective test, but we must look at the Constitution as well. And the coinage was the reasonable victim. And I have to tell you, I'm now thinking, okay, do you understand? What is a victim? Can a victim be reasonable? Do you know what a victim, if anybody, you speak to anybody that's been abused, you are irrational. So I cannot accept that test, but it's not it's just one of the judgments. So there are other judges that can also speak. But what I'm sharing with you is that from the appeal courts or the higher courts, I don't think that this has been thrashed out in our judiciary. So the courts haven't been sufficiently on this. Currently, everybody will tell you it's an objective test. Who has always been sitting on the bench? It has always historically been patriarchal. So perhaps now with other perspectives, with the vanguard of the Constitution, here we see a judgment grappling with objective test, same as the Constitution. I don't think they got it completely. I don't think they got it right at all by saying you cannot go with the reasonable victim. It's in a judgment. Go and look at SABWiL versus lamakhosikazi. He's tried. But I don't believe any psychologist will tell you a victim, anybody that's abused, it is not a reasonable person. So you can't say, what is a reasonable victim going to do in that circumstance? So what is that? I am affronted because it is the test when you go to these, you implement all these structures, it's going to say objectively, okay, all the people, how did this, what does that look like? But the reason they might be doing this is the balancing the interests. Because if you say it's subjective, it's only what she's saying is in her mind, then you might infringe the rights of others. Because now, in her mind, you've harassed her, but you would just be polite. So you think that, you hug everybody. It's just who you are. Now, in her mind, this is just, so that's now where I think we need development. adamant you're agree with that. I like the fact that you're agree with it, but I think we need more training on this. And if you are going to enter jurisprudence, this is where the law needs to be developed. And the only people that can really articulate on what harassment is eventually is the courts. And the courts will be informed by your thorough declaration. And what I will say to you is it cannot, if in the delict, if you know what a delict is, you need a cause of action. You need an unlawful act. You need fault. You need damage. What else do you need? There is something else I haven't mentioned. I don't know if causation. So you know. So you need things, you need elements. But still, it is the thin stuff. So when you go for a delict, Basic knows this back to front, I know this back to front. You look at that victim as you find it, if this victim is highly sensitized, and the second person would have not taken it that seriously, it doesn't matter. You threw that stone, this person lost a job, destroyed, right? So you take the victim front. But when it comes to sexual harassment or actually harassment, so far I have not seen that. I have not. And this is something many moons ago, before this invitation, I looked at this one because I'm a woman in this industry. So I want to know what my rights are. So I know there's a lot of women organizations historically, from when I read years ago, things might have changed, have been trying for the subjectivities. And that the men historically would have liked the objectivities because it gives them more room to navigate. Because in objectively speaking, so what I'm trying to say is we are provocative. We are not there to accept the status quo if it does not respect us, if it does not allow us to actualize all those rights that those mamas fought for, that are in the Constitution. So we have the power, and it has to go through process. Now my problem is that I'm speaking to you as a jurist, but now there are practical issues. You know, the practicalities of what you've relayed, the practicalities of universities, of being in the employment situation. So from that point of view, you know, it is, and just to be if I take on the hushed harassment, I'd say I take Mapula. Mapula is a really successful legal practitioner, really qualified. She's doing everything she needs to do, and she was in a relationship on and off with a gentleman. It didn't work out. But I mean, you know, if anybody knows about relationships, it's in other interests, you know, there's a process. So she has decided that she really does want to continue this relationship. But now, you know, the minute she's flourishing, she's smiling, here he comes, he wants to buy the roses, he wants to get her back, everything. You know, it's concert tickets left, it's flowers, it's chocolates, and also they were in a relationship, so he knows a weak spot. Now my question and what I want you to think about, remember there's roses. He's dropping roses at your office. He's delivering chocolates. He's leaving all these gifts, but she has already made it clear. Please leave me alone, do not contact me. Because she knows the fact that it goes on, and he wants to wear her down. He wants to wear her down, but she really has decided. So that is why part of the SABWiL of my ethos is respect. Now I want you to take this Mapula and you look at the laws. There you have the Harassment Act. There you have the Domestic Violence. There you have the Sexual Harassment Code of Good Practice. What is her recourse? No. Question is she being harassed? Is that acceptable conduct? I've said Mapula Now, all I'm saying is this is a crass example. It's an overt example. But it's very similar and very linked to what was expressed in the universities. You can't fine-tune the context because it's purportedly acceptable conduct. It's purportedly, I mean, when Mapula went to a college and said, you know, this guy's roses all the time, she's giving away. Why would it? It's a gift. It's a beautiful thing. But she has said, I do not want you to court me. This is just not it. Go away. So I am very for respect. And I think no is no. So people have learned that no is no in the context of a sexual act. We've had to teach them that. But now no is no. But for some reason, until it becomes that act that everybody clearly knows is unacceptable, this conduct is very, we can't find a way to keep this person friends. And I have learned, like I've read extensively on abuse and oppression, and I think, you know, my solutions will not be your solutions, but I will tell you, all us women that have gone through this patriarchal structures, we know what's going on. You know, we may not express it indicate. So I can tell you what my solutions are that are not use. I am now no longer a child. I started practicing maybe when I was 23, so I am 42. So I'm not going to, people are not easily going to come and try and harass me. You see, at this point. But when you're young, when you're starting out, you are your most vulnerable. You are your most vulnerable. Now what I can tell you is, I still apply a lot of my techniques, and I'm going to share them with you. And I've shared them, I've put them on my when I posted my SABWiL group a long time ago, I said, these are my tips. Whoever read them will find my tips. I mean, they're just my tips. So what I do is, because it's part of my ethos, I'm really so into prevention. So I like to be healthy, so I take care of myself, I do exercise, I go to the gym, I do what I need to do to be healthy. I'm not waiting until I have cancer and fix it. So that's part of my ethos. So I make sure that I look after myself. So I apply that as well in my psychological space. So when you talk psychological space, oppression is where, and harassment is people are coming into your psyche. The best way to deal, you must identify, is the, so you identify, I mean, it could be that it's a simple, innocent cultural issue, and the person just, this is just not on. And it will happen. Now the law in most, the body of cases, laud that, say no, say it's unacceptable and then it's listen thereafter. But it comes to, you know, the extreme forms. The labor practice is a little bit better because you can just walk away and that's taken as no, or you can not feed that conduct. So it gives you a bit more room. But psychologically, I don't like toxic people. So when people are bad, I'm giving you mine, right? So you will have your own. I just don't like toxic people. You will know who's good energy, who's bad. So if this person is just such a negative and they're draining, I'm like, oh, you know what happens in professional environments? How can these things happen where I can now physically harass you or anyone else? How does it happen? And I'm going to do it here. I can do it. You see. So you must identify the wants to do dinner after hours and he's a cop. I'm going to make sure it's in the book about it, I'm going to say, you know what, let's come with you. Or if you've got a husband or a partner or boyfriend, take them with. Why not? I mean, they invited you after hours, it's not a collegial. Take them with, don't be shy. So you must have your number two. And that is also applicable in medical situations. They always say have an opinion, a second opinion. You know, even when I speak to some people that are going to divorce attorneys, I say, take someone with you because you're so vulnerable. I don't, because any relationship, any time, you must identify, am I wrong? And when you're a youth, you are always, because you are still striving, you don't yet have the money and the independence and the titles to say, I don't care what you think, because you still need validation and endorsement. That lecturer has power, that employer has power. So I don't do dinners alone with colleagues. I would take someone else, or it must be a group colleague. So that's a practical implementation. What I do, now remember you have officers. So personally, and I've mentored people, advocates, I tell them this. You know, I tell them what I'm telling you. I say, if somebody comes in and they close that door, get up and just open it a little. I don't allow people to have closed doors. Because what happens with a closed door? It might be, so, you know, it is a technique. Nobody's trying to do anything funny if that doors are, it doesn't have to, it's a confidential meeting. I mean, what's wrong if that doors are open? The other problem, the benefit of that is women get a reputation very easy. So if you're sitting there, even though nothing's happening and it's innocent, you work so hard, you really do what now? People to back chat and say that because you are being mentored favorably and elevating, you are going to do so often. She's in that closed door. So what I'm saying is you don't need to do what I do, but I'm giving you my paradigm and you will figure it out. And what is very critical, really, in abusive situations, and oppressive situations, is what do oppressors and abusers do? Oppressors and abusers, they must isolate you psychologically. So an oppressor will try and turn your friends against you. An oppressor, and I'm talking about serious abuse. You know, you talking about he's not here to listen to my thoughts. The woman that was harassed and stayed in that relationship, we cannot judge her. We must help her. She needs a kind ear. She needs somebody that you can talk to. But to sit there and judge her is to say she must be a reasonable victim. I don't agree with that. Because it is like drugs. Have you seen a person, I've seen people on drugs. You cannot sit there. My taste with drugs was a cigarette. So I was very naughty. Since I was 12 until 27, I was a smoker. No, 15 until 27, I was a smoker. But it taught me a valuable lesson. I didn't touch anything. The way I got off was to just become healthy. I went to gym. So I changed my lifestyle. Now I'm health guru, look after myself. But I was very toxic growing up. It's growing up. It's okay. We must. You know, sometimes you go down the wrong avenue. You say, oh God, please forgive me. Please, I'm so sorry. It's natural. It's possible. And it's how we become human. Because if you live in your car, you do it, just live in the little close safe spaces and you will never commit to that. It's not right. I like the balance. So I like to if you're going to be professional, you're going to have to navigate. Navigating life is a tightrope. You know, sometimes you're going to fall on the other side, but it's fine. It doesn't mean you must live there in that dark space forever. You just forgive, you take the blessing from it, and there's a gift in everything, so you learn. So like, look at my gift on cigarettes. I swear to you, don't you come to me with anything else, because it was my house telling me to give a cigarette. It was it's not easy. Do you know when you're psychologically addicted, and not only psychologically, physically addicted, it's an addiction. So what I'm saying to you is sick people, you know, addicts and people that are abused and living in that environment, we cannot judge them because they have already become ill. And the way that you help is to listen. And they need a safe space. So I asked somebody that was in an abusive environment, what do we do? So she said the way they can leave that environment is if they have the safe space to go to where they are safe. Now what happens is, where is most people going to go? You're going to go back to your parents, and then can they financially afford you? If you've got funds, it's fine. You can buy a beautiful place and go and do something there, but it's also a psychological thing. So you gravitate back to the pain. So oppression is a very, very sensitive and serious issue, and I would say that if people are in those environments, they need psychological help, because we are not professional enough to do it. It's not our training. So you need that kind of counselor that understands that dynamic. And what I would say is, I pray the national health insurance takes off and it works. Because one of the problems is, if you're affluent, you can afford a psychologist. You can afford, like your medical aid pays for these things. I don't know if universities automatically give you the counseling options. But I mean, it must be independent. It mustn't go back to the system. So somewhere along the line, those independent counseling sessions that are safe and not going to be reported back, they could facilitate and be built into those wellness programs. So I support the right to health and actualizing that for all of us. Because it's tragic if you have family members that you love and they can't get the treatment and they sit so long in hospital. So these are all part and parcel of, I think, the wellness and the gender development and the youth issues. So while people are talking and there's like movements in budget and they haven't figured it out, why not, if there's some sort of salient policy, push it through that youth have a particular access in a particular way, because I think youth must always, you're always going to have these navigations where there's the power, and as they say, there's the power, and there's somebody aspiring, then there's the opportunity for abuse. So from that level, what else do I do? So I think you must have someone to talk to. It's very important. So your friend, you mustn't shut up. If you don't feel safe going to the leaders of organization, speak to your contemporary. That's why these blast structures, the alumni, you are still safe with each other. Keep your friendships, because maybe in terms of a structure, you just want to have a little quiet conversation. And when that person, especially with abusive relationships, if you're talking to a friend and the guy or the person who would have now demoralized you to such an extent, you would think it's acceptable conduct. But your friend would say, what? That's just not on. And they say, oh, it's not. Yeah. So you must always, there are people that love you. You know who loves you. The people that really love you are going to be disgusted. So we may not want to tell. Talk to a friend. And maybe the girlfriend doesn't know how I really think you must talk. So, thank you. Talking is something, and then if you can't, you don't feel safe enough with instructors, you've got medical aid or national health insurance that covers it, you go to an external psychologist that specializes in it. I'm not so sure if I feel safe going to the psychologist in that particular structure, going to the person in that structure, even if it's a working environment, because they pay you. Now, advocates normally, unless you're a trust fund advocate, I'm a referral advocate, I have to be true. So, we don't have, we are by law currently sold right. So nobody pays, I'm a